Hello, hello. I know it's been a while since you've heard of me or seen anything of me on this platform, but I feel like I had every bit of an intention to come here and speak to you about the concept of why and why is so destructive of a concept. The idea of us knowing why we do things and struggling to find a why, when in reality we kind of need to let go and remain comfortable with the concept of not knowing why. When we start to gain some success or gain traction, finding a why is sometimes the beginning of the unraveling. Um, because who knows why certain things happen? Who knows why anything happens in this life? But all that we know is it happens. And sometimes trying to find a why is natural and inherent to humanity, but a why can be as destructive as not knowing it or knowing why sometimes as well. I was listening to a friend's podcast, and her name is Bailey, and she spoke about the concept of Dead Poet Society and Neil killing himself at the end, ultimately after finding out his why. How dangerous the concept of him finding out his why was. He discovered in that very performance that he was in that he was destined to be in bondage for his entire life, and he had finally expressed the why, the purpose of his life, and realized that he'd never be able to live in that why because of his circumstances. Or maybe he would have been, who knows? So he killed himself. And in the theme of death, I had such an idea for this podcast, and then OJ Simpson died. I think I heard of his passing, and it was weird because I don't know the guy. I don't have a vested interest in him. And as he's portrayed and known as, he's known as the guy who was, well, who killed many people. Not many people, but he supposedly killed. And I say allegedly because it's not conclusive. And I could have my own opinion, but I haven't done enough research on it. Like some people say it was his son. Some people say that. I don't know. There are a lot of theories that circulate, of course, but all I know is there's a lot more to that case than what we see. I mean, spiritual realm and stuff like that. And I won't attest to it because I can't see into it, so I can't speak on something I don't know. But the theme of death is a topic that I do want to think and talk about because I think about it a lot, and I know a lot of people think about it as well. Not the concept of an imminent death or death plaguing us or taking life away from us, but death liberating us and freeing us from a will or a reality that is so ugly that death is what's warranted. Hold up. My mom's calling me. Let me answer this and then I'll be back. So, in addition to what I was saying, I do want to emphasize the fact that this is by no means absolving, exonerating, or giving somebody who did evil, well, any justification or any. Because I guess as an observer of human experiences, it's hard to not look at somebody as a human, but that's also the greatest flaw of somebody, not being able to not see them as human and seeing them for their actions before their humanity. But to me, everybody will be a human first, even if you believe that personhood wise, certain things demote your personhood. And I don't even know where the word personhood came from because that's a whole other discussion. But I hope that my point is being conveyed. Kind of like demerit points. You know, how when you get into certain accidents or certain things happen, you lose your credibility for driving or insurance. The more certain things happen, you become a liability to an insurance company and they're less likely to insure you. Or the concept of credit, and the worse your credit is, the least likely you are to get a loan or something. So I guess in humanity, people would say the equivalent of that in humanity would be if you do bad things or such as murder and many other things, you demerit points, like humanity demerit points. Yeah. But before we get into that, I think I was speaking about death and how it impacts people and how to many people, OJ Simpson didn't receive the justice that he should have in his life. Ultimately, the irony of it is he ended up going to prison for something that many people would agree was kind of wrong. He ended up going to prison for taking stuff that belonged to him. Although there was an altercation and a lot of really, really sinister things happened in that room, the foundation of it is he wanted to get his stuff back. Or at least that's the story that I've heard. I'm not so sure how true it is. And he went to jail, which many people saw as justice, but kind of not for what he should have gone in for, but he was still in, so people weren't really that upset. And I guess his death is a weird little thing. Not little thing, but thing as a whole. Since to those who know him and to those who love him and are grieved for him and don't feel peace for him, they personally will feel a pain that is inexplicable. The pain of a loved one dying is not one that ever can fully be healed, especially if that loved one's made such an impact on you, if they've provided for you in ways that you really can't explain. But for those who are on the side of the deceased, what do you do? What do you do other than feel some sort of dignity or justice that the man who took two of your loved ones off of this earth are supposedly, I sound like him in his hypothetically if I did it book, but um, if he's the one who supposedly took the lives of two of your loved ones, what do you do? Where do you even put yourself? Like where do you put yourself? Because everybody is loved by somebody, and nobody should be vilified for mourning somebody that they've loved and they know. And it puts people in a weird position, especially when death happens to those who are not exactly the best of people, but can't do much because you don't pick the family you're born into. You don't really get to, sometimes you don't even get to choose who you love. Love chooses you, whether you like it or not. That's kind of hard. So his death puts people in a really weird position. The position of being with the family of Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman, and understanding that those two precious, beautiful lives were taken away. And just because OJ is the man of a certain status, that he shouldn't be exonerated for it. But then there's also the position of those who loved OJ and figuring it out and mourning him and them kind of being vilified for doing so. You should never be criticized for how you mourn unless your mourning directly impacts other people. And that's kind of what I'm alluding to. It's weird. It's weird. It's weird. It's weird. And it's, I'm just going to bring this up as a subtopic. I was talking to my mom and she was reiterating the concept of, I was talking to her about this very concept. I was telling her that it troubles me that a lot of the pictures that I see commemorating his life were at his lowest point. Him in a courtroom, him in the orange jumpsuit. And that's not a representation of a man or a person as a whole. No one should be represented by their lowest moment. On the other hand, it also is indicative of how they chose to be represented. No one asked you to do the crime. No one asked you to do it. So you really are straddling a weird line there. It's not really a weird line. It's kind of definitive. So my mom reminded me of what happened with Michael Jackson and what happened with the allegations that flooded. Like, the man is dead and has 14 new counts and charges. He can't even defend himself. And then Kobe Bryant, when he died, and the allegations being brought up, and then she emphasized the fact that all three of them were black. And I think that's a point I would touch on if I knew more about it and knew about the whole concept of, or if it hadn't been touched upon better than I could even do it. OJ Made in America, beautiful, beautiful biopic. It's a bio series, and it details all of the nuances and layers that my mom tried to convey in that small statement of, do you realize that all three of them were black? Like, do you really fully understand that? And I think OJ Made in America does it perfectly for all three of those characters. Well, not characters, people. We make characters of people. Michael Jackson is lore. Kobe Bryant is lore. OJ Simpson is lore. But they are real people at the end of the day. So, in the theme of death, I want to talk about death and liberty, and how oftentimes we look at death as the finality, the closing, the ending, when to some, death is actually liberation. I can't imagine and I guess this is some soothsaying things that I say to myself to at least give me a sense of knowing of the unknown, which is inherently what I do and inherently an issue. I just started the podcast about talking about why and how it's dangerous to try and get a firm grasp over things that we don't know how much we don't know. and I'm doing it right now. I don't know how much I don't know about death, but in regard to that statement, I also want to emphasize that there are many who live realities that are so grim and dark in life that you look at their death and it kind of seems to make sense. For example, XXX Tentacion, his death brought much grief. A lot of to this day, a lot of people still grieve that energy. I think there is a line in Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates that expresses it well. He had to wrestle with the death of somebody who was young and bright. And there are a lot more concepts there that were being meshed into one that I think would be better off for you reading the book as a whole to fully grasp. I don't think I could fully do it a service. But he, a guy close to him who was around the same age, I believe was a victim to death. And it was so hard for Ta-Nehisi Coates to explain, and he illustrated it perfectly by saying when somebody dies, all that energy, that potential now just lays desolate. It becomes dark. Think of it as a symbiote taking over Spider-Man, as all of his everything, his moral concepts, his everything are now being skewed by this symbiote. He has now become the symbiote. The energy and the vitality that life has to bring being corrupted and corroded by the element we call death. And XXXTentacion was a perfect example of that. So much promise, so much humanity, so much life to live. I don't even think he was legal drinking age when he died. And it's hard. And then you look at where his life was going, what he was trying to do. He was trying to repent for his own sins. And no, whether it's known publicly or not, the general consensus is that he probably would have been locked up if he had stayed alive. They would have probably found a reason. It's not like he was a man who could run away from his demons. He understood that he had to face them and confront them. He understood that justice had to come in his life at some point. So in his death, in a weird way, he kind of escaped. And it's weird to see death through many eyes, because there are some who believe that death isn't even the final consequence, that some people should suffer here on earth. I've seen many cases where people die, and I've had to hear the perspectives of, well, death isn't enough for what they've done in life. But then to some people, death is the very final consequence and punishment that they warrant for what they've done in life. It's weird to me how death is used in opportune and inopportune moments. I don't know if inopportune is a word, but I think I'm conveying the point, whether it be horribly conveyed or greatly conveyed. I don't know. I don't know. That's the concept of death that eludes me and really I struggle with. And OJ Simpson falls right in the middle of it. And then guys like Vaughn, the artist, I have a hard time with that because he did so much evil. He killed people, but people mourn the guy not just because of his promise, but because of what he was looking to do. I don't know if I can give that example. You know what? Eradicate it fully. There are people who document that better than me, and that's not my story to tell. It's just weird how death can be used as a. I don't know. I don't usually spend a lot of time just saying I don't know on this podcast, but I think accepting that I don't know is the beauty of finding one's voice. The beauty of not knowing is kind of nice, but also punishing at the same time. How do you explain it? What do you explain? We wrestle with these concepts that are inherent to life as a whole, wrestle with death, which is inherent to life. And then we wrestle with the bias, the perspective, the perception of life and the stories of one's life and wondering why someone had to die, how someone had to die. We look at it and we say, maybe that was fitting for the person they were. Maybe that was their consequence. But do we really even know why what happened happened? Like, we really don't know. We really don't know anything. We don't know what we don't know. We really don't. Why O.J. Simpson dies at 76. Why certain people are killed. Like, whenever a huge black figure is killed by the black community, I always tend to see the concept of why is George Zimmerman still walking the streets, the guy who killed Trayvon Martin? And why are we here killing our own when there are people who actually are killing us who are still alive? The why eludes us and punishes us, and it's abusive. It doesn't give us any solvency, it doesn't give us any remorse. It just expects us to accept things for as they are. And that's hard. I'm not saying I have to, and I'm not saying we have to. But as a collective, the why is such a tough concept. It's like why should a person be vilified for their mourning? But why should they mourn a person who did evil? Why should the person who did evil get a chance to escape this life when a person who's also done that much evil rots away in bondage? Why does bondage equate freedom? Why is death more liberating to some than bondage? And to many, why is bondage the suffering that we give people other than death? I don't know. I really don't know. And it's not for me to answer this question. I guess I'm reaching out to you all to give me answers, to kind of put this narrative together and piece it all together for me, piece by piece, brick by brick, right? Because I don't think we can ever fully figure out why. The very element of death is a curious one. And I guess OJ Simpson's death doesn't impact me on an OJ level, like who he was, what he did, but it really, really puts together this mystery, this riddle that I've been exploring of why. The why. Do we ever fully ever know why? Can we ever fully speak to somebody's interior during their exterior evils? I was just talking to somebody about natural disasters, and why is it that we look to justify our emotions but yet call nature's disasters disasters? Why can't nature also have eruptions? Why can't nature also take lives with its disasters? We as humans look for other people to justify and absolve us with our intent. Our intentions were pure, but then we tornado through life, and we tornado and we kill people emotionally, physically, spiritually, in the pursuit of doing such, in the pursuit of finding self, in the pursuit of discovering self. But yet, when nature has these tempests, these storms, these hurricanes, these earthquakes, and I'm by no means justifying it, but we call them disasters. But when do we look within and find the disasters within ourselves? We call that being human. We don't call that natural. We don't call those natural disasters. It's inconsistent. But then we look to nature and call that a natural disaster. We are ticking time bombs. And if our emotions aren't handled properly, a lot of people might end up in the way of something really harmful. And that to me is a natural disaster. Humanity sometimes can be the biggest natural disaster. As Denzel Washington said, do we blame the sheep for attacking the wolf after the wolf has perpetrated it for so long? I mean, attacked it for so long? Do we blame the provoked? Do we blame the unprovoked for finally attacking the one who provokes them? Nobody's saying it's right. Nobody's saying it's right. I'm not saying it's right. But why do we look to nature? Why do we look to God and blame God so frequently for some of these very concepts when we can't even wrestle with the why within? I don't know. I'm probably not conveying any of this right or correctly. There's going to be no music behind this one. I have nothing to say. I guess the very music is going to be the human voice, and that's really all this is going to be. Signing off. I hope that all of you have a beautiful day. I love you all. And if anything, just know that please reach out. I'll always be here to speak. I'll always be here to give perspective, whether I know it or not. um, there's probably not going to be a lot of vitriol behind this podcast because nobody knows me. So I have the privilege of saying these things and not being vilified for it. Thank goodness. But if this ends up backfiring and people do see this or hear it, then so be it. I'll open up that perspective to them because I like hearing what people think and have to say. I'm not a defender of much other than certain small things. Not small things, but my faith, I'll defend it. But because I do know that to be true, which to many I've just contradicted the concept of why. Do we ever fully know why? And I guess to that notion, two things can be true at once. Many things can be true at once. Things can be true without. Things can be true and untrue, untrue and true. There's reality and unreality, and there's unreality and reality. Like, I'm not saying two-ness. Get out of the two-ness mindset. Things aren't black and white. It doesn't have to be like that. It's a spectrum. And we take in life on that spectrum every day, every single day. Things aren't one or the other. Things can be everything at once. That's the best way I can put it. I love you all, and I really hope that you have a beautiful day.